Yes, Georgia's going to be Georgia, or so we think. We'll talk more about that in a second. But what are the questions that we need answers to decide this side of the SEC? Let's talk about it right now. I alluded to it a second ago. The Georgia Bulldogs, man, are they going to win a third national title? Are they going to win the SEC East for the second year in a row? Well, here's where that hangs on for me. Are our assumptions of Georgia as solid as we think they are? You say, JD, what do you mean? Well, what I mean is I think we're kind of assuming a lot of things about Georgia that we believe to be true, but we actually don't know without a shadow of a doubt are going to be true. Example, Mike Bobo, the new OC. They're giving him the keys to this offense. They're giving him the keys to this offense that was humming a season ago, scoring over 40 points a game. We're assuming the offense is going to be as dynamic as it was a season ago. Are we sure in that assumption? Are we correct in that assumption? It's going to be a big piece of what Georgia does because, like I said on previous shows, Georgia is showing attention to the offensive side of the ball, especially on the recruiting trail. To win in modern college football, by nature of the teams that made the playoff last year, who all scored over 40 points a game, you got to score at an elite rate as Mike Bobo equipped them to continue to score how they scored and be dynamic, how they were dynamic and balanced, how they were balanced a season ago under Todd Monken. The assumption is yes, but are we solid in that? Remains to be seen. Carson Beck, I've told you, man, I went so far to say I think he's a sleeper Heisman guy. I really do. I think he's going to put up stats. I assume he's going to step in there and deal like we saw him do in the spring game, but are we sure? Are we correct in that assumption? Because Stetson Bennett now, he got a lot of flack for his time at Georgia. Good news is he may come back to Georgia at some point in time and get that degree. We love you, Stetson. But he did a lot for this team. I mean, there were multiple times last year for Georgia where he was the differentiating factor for them offensively, get him in the right plays and making big-time throws. Like, Stetson Bennett was that dude. Kirby Smart said after the national title game, I was there sitting in the media room where he said he's got GOAT status in Athens, Georgia. You want to fight somebody? Don't fight me. Fight Kirby Smart on that statement, that is. I think he's going to step in there and deal, but if he doesn't, that changes things for Georgia. So that's a question mark. That's an assumption that we're all making. We're assuming the defense reaches the talent potential they have on that side of the ball. That's been the calling card for them, but they still lose some pieces. Still lose some key pieces, especially up front. How does that look? No more Keely Ringo. No more Jalen Carter. What does that look like? I'm just curious. I don't think it's going to be a thing where they fall off the face of the earth, but this is an assumption that still has to happen. Last one. We're assuming Tennessee is the only test on their schedule. That's the assumption. They got other teams that I think could push them. Maybe there's more than one test on there. I remember what Missouri did last year. Remember what Kentucky did last year. Those were games that were maybe a little more entertainment value than a lot of people in Athens, Georgia would have liked. A lot of assumptions, but here's the deal. If our assumptions are as solid as we think they are, Georgia is going to win the SEC again, and Georgia will be in the college football playoff and be a real contender, probably a real favorite, front runner to win the national title for the third year in a row. So that's Georgia. Really quickly, make sure you subscribe right here to the On3 YouTube channel. We talk ball every single day. You're a sicko for this game, and we appreciate you for that because we're sickos over here too. So we're two peas in the pod. Make sure you're subscribed. We love y'all. Also, follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram at JD Pickell. Okay, so thank you so much for that. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in currently during the premiere. Make sure you like the video on your way out. It just helps us. We got a streak right now of 100 likes on our last 2 live shows. I might go back further than that, but I'm just saying, let's keep the streak alive here, right? Enough shameless plug. Tennessee. My question for them as it pertains to this SEC East race, the Beasts of the East, do we get Orange Bowl Joe Milton? Is it really just reload at the quarterback position for Josh Heupel? Because Hendon Hooker was special last year, man. I mean, he propelled them. And then he ends up getting hurt tragically. Joe Milton steps in, and in that Orange Bowl on an enormous stage, just went to work, dude. Like, we saw Joe Milton look like one of the best quarterbacks in the country in that game. Now, that's a small sample size. That's one game. And I believe that we will get Orange Bowl Joe Milton this coming season, or at least a version of that. But if we don't, that changes everything for Tennessee because they are a run-first offense, but a lot of what they do goes through the quarterback. from getting them in the right play to hitting the open shot to running the offense at the tempo they want to run it at. Like, they put a lot on this quarterback's plate. And no shade to the good folks in Knoxville, but we're on the same page about the secondary. The secondary's got to get better. I think it will get better. That's probably the other major question you have for your Vols if you're a Tennessee fan. But even so, secondary wasn't great last year, even though the statistics were a little bit skewed. But still, why were you as successful record-wise as you were last year? Because the offense, because Hendon Hooker was dealing. Does Joe Milton deal in the same fashion? Is he on the same playing field as what Hendon Hooker did last year? He was in the Orange Bowl. Do we get to see it? Because if he doesn't, then the pressure goes back to the defense, like I was just talking about. Then you need the defense to maybe bring a little bit more to the party than you were originally asking. That's my question for Tennessee. If you're not scoring 40+, which would require Joe Milton to deal, maybe you feel differently about yourself. I think he will, just so we're all on the same page. I think he will be really good. How long does that take? It's going to be a deciding factor for Tennessee as they chase an SEC title. Now, Florida is probably one of the greatest unknowns in college football heading into 2023. A lot of people think they know what Florida's going to be. Vegas has got them at this 5.5 win total. That's fine. My real question for them, though, is there actually more depth on the defensive side of the ball? Now, they allowed 30 points a game last year. That ain't good. And the people that watch ball, people that watch Florida, you know it wasn't because they didn't have good players starting. Was it an All-American, All-11? Not necessarily, but they still had some good players. But when we saw them wear down was later in games. We had Jervin Dexter playing like, I don't know how many snaps, way more than a defensive lineman should be playing. What I'm trying to say is in the SEC, you got to have some depth defensively. Florida didn't last year. We saw what happened. So for Florida, we've heard a lot this offseason about how they have improved the depth, how Austin Armstrong has improved that defense. And a lot of people want to talk about the quarterback position. The quarterback position, I believe it's going to be Graham Mertz, so we'll talk about Graham Mertz right now. Graham Mertz's job will be substantially easier if he knows that defense has his back. That defense will have a much easier time having his back if they have a couple of platoons they can plug and play with, and they can hold offenses to a lower total of scoring. Because then Graham Mertz doesn't have to press when he gets out there. Then they can actually run the ball and let their big dogs eat with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. Like you've heard me talk about that before. It's kind of sounding familiar right now. Yes, the quarterback position is a huge question. But a lot of what they ask of that quarterback is going to be dictated on the situation of the game. Situation of the game is going to be dictated by what you have defensively. So the depth of the defense, that's the key for me for Florida. If it's improved, watch out now for the Gators. I seemingly, after 1 year, which is wild, am in the minority that Billy Napier's a good coach. It feels that way, at least. If it's not, get in the chat, get in the comment section and let me know. A lot of people seem to be down on Billy Napier after 1 year, which, first of all, shame on y'all for making such a quick decision on a coach. And if I'm wrong, then shame on me. But I don't think I am on Billy Napier. So, depth on defense. Very, very crucial. Now, South Carolina. Here's my question. How's this? Who are you? Right? A real specific question for South Carolina. Who are you? Because I saw multiple versions of the Gamecocks last year. I did. You did too. We saw them lose to Florida and look like they had no idea what they were doing offensively. And then we saw them play against Tennessee and against Clemson and absolutely break the scoreboard. Which South Carolina are we getting this year? Because now you're going into year 3 for Shane Beamer. And I think that they have an identity, and I'm excited for them to show it to the rest of college football. But the unfortunate reality is culture and your win-loss total don't always go hand in hand. But I think that they were able to really do some phenomenal things game plan-wise and just show me the better team that Saturday against those two top 10 opponents. My question is that who we see for the duration of the season? Or is that just what we saw at the end of last year, and then we have to kind of recalibrate our expectations for South Carolina? Because South Carolina, I think, has proven they can beat anybody. Like, they can play with you any Saturday you want. Doesn't matter where we're at. We'll play in the parking lot. That's how I think South Carolina feels. It's a dangerous approach for the rest of the SEC, to be real with you. Spencer Rattler's got a lot under the hood. When he's cooking, he's one of the best in the country. Yes, I said that. When he's cooking. I didn't say he's just pulling up and he's going to drop the top and be the best quarterback when he pulls up to the game, but I am saying this. I do think when Spencer Rattler's on, he's on. Ask Tennessee about it. No shade to Tennessee fans, but you saw what he did. Juice Wells, he's a dog now on the outside. He's going to have to deal with him. The subplot to this that's going to really determine how good South Carolina is and kind of answers the question, who are you? Yes, Spencer Rattler's got to be in his bag. Yes, Juice Wells has got to be that guy and dominate how we expect him to dominate. Defensive line. Heck, the front seven, the defense, can't allow 200 yards rushing a game. Not in the SEC. Not week in and week out in the SEC. You can't ask your offense to score every single drive. They didn't ask that last year, but you hear the sentiment of what I'm saying. It's big boy football in the SEC. South Carolina was more than up to the task the last couple of years. I just want to see if they're able to hold their water a little bit better on that side of the ball. Because if they can, and Spencer Rattler's cooking, and the offense is rolling now under Dowell Loggins, hey, watch out for South Carolina. They've proven they can beat you. They've proven they're not one to be truffled with. Shout out Michael Scott. Now, last thing we want to talk about here is the Kentucky Wildcats. My question for them is, what's the Devin Leary effect? I am not in the business of hot takes. I think that is just, quite frankly, when people throw out takes for likes and clicks, whatever, I think that's garbage. I think this sport is way too important to a lot of us, and we hold it too closely to throw that out. I say this because I mean this. I think that Devin Leary has a chance to be a better leader of this offense than Will Levis was. And what I mean by that is Will Levis, as talented as he is, and why he may be a more gifted thrower of the football, double-digit turnovers, double-digit interceptions, both of his last 2 seasons. So for Devin Leary, you take better care of the football and you get it to these playmakers hey, we could be in business now. We saw Devin Leary flash at NC State in 21. We'll see what he does this coming season. 22, he was kind of dinged up and it was a little bit of a tough deal. But I'll just say this, man. Kentucky's sneaky. If you pick them to win the East or not, that's fine. But a lot of people want to forget that final score against Georgia, that team that just absolutely drugged TCU in the national title, back-to-back national champs, was 16-6 was the final score of that game. 16-6. Now, it was ugly. It was bad weather. It was at Kentucky. They'll have to go to Athens this year. I'm just saying, man, I'm not picking them to upset Georgia, but I am just saying watch out for Kentucky because Devin Leary, I think, could up the level of the offense. Got to replace some production on defense, but Tavian Robinson, Dane Key, Barian Brown, 3-headed monster that a lot of the country just doesn't necessarily know about yet because not enough people watch Kentucky. But those 3 dudes, man, especially Barian Brown, I'd put him up there with anybody in the country, man. I'll tell you what, as an all-purpose player, he is a home run threat every time he touches the ball. Kickoff return, catching it out wide as a possession guy, going deep like Barian Brown now. Get to know the name if you don't already, because he's going to be a problem for you. Now, I'll say this. Didn't mention Missouri. Didn't mention Vanderbilt. I have reservations on Missouri. I just do. Offense scored 24 points a game last year, and we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. Okay? Vanderbilt, Clark Lee, I think he's going to build that thing. I think they're going to really start to try and build from the ground up. I don't think it's going to be a thing where they go to the portal and they go and grab these guys and just overhaul. They got Prince Kali, who was a 5-star at one point in time. That's a big get for them. Don't get it twisted. I'll just say this about Missouri and about Vanderbilt. The SEC is a lot like Australia. You walk around off of the beaten path, start messing around in places you're not as familiar with, there's stuff in there that could end you. There's stuff crawling around. If you don't bring your best on that Saturday, that could end your dreams. That could take care of you. It's a bit of a morbid way to look at it, but I'm just saying, while I'm not picking Missouri or Vandy to win the SEC East, you don't want to take them seriously one Saturday, stuff can happen. So we'll leave it on that, but Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky, I got questions for all of them in the SEC East. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. A lot of fun to watch those teams get after it rest of the way.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.